Okay, so equation of a circle. Okay, so a circle has a center point of HK. And a radius of R. When x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And this is the standard form for the equation of a circle. Okay, so let's say, for example, we want to find the center point and radius for, let's say, x plus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 4. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to rewrite it to match the formula. Okay, so here notice you have a minus sign that you need to have for both of those. So you can make that x minus negative 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared is equal to 2 squared. Okay, so in this case, your h is equal to negative 2. Your k is equal to 3. And your radius is equal to 2. Okay, so your center, which is HK, just becomes negative 2, 3. And your radius is just 2. Okay, so that means if you wanted to graph this one, x, that's your y. You go right to your center, which is, let's say, negative 1, negative 2. Say this is negative 2, 3. And then you just go out a distance of 2, which brings you about right there. Actually, that should come up right about there, give or take. What would it look somewhat like that, but neater. Yeah, but it would look a lot neater on the computer. All right, so any questions on that one? All right. I'll leave that up for a few more seconds. All right. Okay, so let's say, for example, if we had, find the center and radius for, let's say, x squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 21. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to rewrite it to match the formula. Okay, so instead of x squared, we can actually write that as x minus 0 squared. Instead of y plus 2, again, y minus negative 2 squared. And instead of 21, we can just make that square root of 21 squared. Okay. So in this case, your h is equal to 0. Your k is equal to negative 2. And your radius is equal to square root of 21. Okay, so your center, remember that's just your hk, so that's going to be 0, negative 2, 0, negative 2. And your radius, which is just your r, equals square root of 21. All right, so any questions on that one? Okay. Okay. So let's say find the center and radius for the circle x squared plus y squared minus 6x plus 4y minus 3 equals 0. Okay, so what we have to do there is we have to actually convert that to the standard form in order to find our center and our radius. Okay, to do that, we're going to use completing the square. Okay, so our first step is we're going to put all the like variables next to each other. We're going to put x squared next to x and y squared next to y. And if it doesn't have a variable, it goes on the other side. Put all like variables next to each other. And constants. Uh-oh. on the other side of the equal sign. Okay, so that means x squared minus 6x are going to go next to each other. Y squared plus 4y are going to go next to each other. And we're going to add 3 to both sides and just make that equal to 3. Okay. Now our next step is we're going to complete the square for both the x terms and the y terms. Okay, so normally I'll just rewrite that but give it like a little bit of space. So x squared minus 6x plus y squared plus 4y equals 3. Okay, so we're going to complete the square for those two and complete the square for those two. Okay, so you know a is equal to 1, b is equal to negative 6. And our completing the square is equal to b divided by 2a squared, which is negative 6 divided by 2 squared, which is negative 3 squared. You want to remember that value before you apply the square. Which means you're completing the square value is 9. Okay. So now we're going to do the exact same thing to the y's. Draw a little imaginary border down there if you want. For these two, a is equal to 1, and b is equal to 4. Okay, so our completing the square is again b divided by 2a squared. That's going to be 4 divided by 2 squared, which is 2 squared. And remember, you want to remember that value. So you're completing the square value here is just 4. Okay. Now your third step is you want to add both of these values to both sides. Okay. So that means we'll have x squared minus 6x plus 9 plus y squared plus 4y plus 4 equals 3 plus 9 plus 4. Okay, so if you get these two, I guess you could say trinomials, not trinomials, but these two sets of 3 terms, this ends up being x minus 3 squared plus this ends up being x plus 2 squared. Y plus 2 squared, sorry. Equals 9 plus 4 plus 3, which is 9 plus 3 is 12, plus 4 is 16. Okay, so now we just rewrite it to match our formula. So you have x minus 3, oh, bring that up just a smidgen, squared plus y minus negative 2 squared equals, and instead of 16, we just make that 4 squared. Okay, so our h is equal to 3. Our y is equal to -2. And our r is equal to 4. Okay, so we can figure out that our center, which is our HK, is 3, -2. And our radius is just 4. Bring that down a little bit. All right, so any questions on that one? Excuse me. Okay, let's leave that up for a few seconds. Okay, so this one was done if there are no coefficients in front of the x squared or the y squared. But sometimes the x squared and y squared will have coefficients. Okay, so we're going to do one example of that one. Okay. All right, so let's say, for example, excuse me. If you want to find the center and vertex, not vertex, think of parabolas, and radius, for the circle, 2x squared plus 8x plus 2y squared plus 4y minus 62 equals 0. So this one, it's already, the x terms are already next to each other, so you don't have to shift anything around. The only thing you do have to get rid of is that 62. Okay, so you have 2x squared plus 8x plus 2y squared plus 4y equals positive 62 once you add 62 to both sides. All right. Now for this one, you're still going to complete the square, but you're going to factor out to get the x squared by itself. And same thing with the y squared. Okay. So complete the square after factoring out the coefficient of the, well, let's say of x squared and y squared. So we're going to still complete the square, but we have to kind of simplify it a little bit first. Okay. So for your 2x terms, you can factor a 2 out of both of those. So if you factor out a 2, That leaves you with x squared plus 4. Plus, and for the two y terms, you can once again factor out a 2. 2 times y squared plus 2 equals 62. Okay. So now we can complete the square for what's inside the parentheses. Oh, give that a little bit of space. Okay, so we're going to complete the square for both of those. Okay, so for this one, remember a is equal to 1. Uh-oh, forgot my x. And that should be y. Sorry about that. Okay, here, your a is equal to 1, and your b is equal to 4. For this one, your a is equal to 1, and your b is equal to 2. Draw a little imaginary border down the middle. Okay, so completing the square is b divided by 2a squared. So it's equal to 4 divided by 2 squared. Uh-oh. Which is just 2 squared. Remember, that's the value you want to remember. Which is just 4. Okay, so we do the same thing to the two y terms. Okay, so you're completing the square. B divided by 2a squared, which is 2. Let me clean up that b a little bit. Which is 2 divided by 2 squared. Which just makes that 1 squared. Which is just 1. Oh, didn't need as much length as I thought. Okay. Now for your third step, and with this one you want to be careful, because once we kind of complete the square, you'll see you can't just add those two to both sides. And I'll show you why. So let's say if you go ahead and put those in to complete the square, you have x squared plus 4x plus 4. Remember, that's times 2. I'll move that over just a little bit. Plus y squared plus 2y plus 1. Remember, that's times 2 is equal to 62. Okay? And there's a reason you couldn't just say, okay, add those two to both sides. Because once you add them on the inside, if you add 4 in here, you technically added 2 times 4. So really you added 8 just for that complete the square. So if you added just 4, it would come out incorrect. So by this being multiplied by 2, technically you added 8 here. And for this one, because you multiplied by 2, technically you actually added 2 to that side, well, that term. Okay, so you couldn't just say 4 and 1 to that side. You have to actually add 8 and 2. Okay, does that make sense? All right. Okay, so just here we have our 2 times x squared plus 4x plus 4, we can rewrite that as x plus 4. Oh, where'd it go? X plus 2, sorry about that. So 2 times x plus 2 squared plus 2. Here, we can actually make that y plus 1 squared. Equals 62 plus 8 is 70, plus 2 is 72. Now, if we divide each term by 2, because it's not really in the form of a circle if it has a coefficient in front of it, so we have to divide each term by 2. We have x plus 2 squared, or x minus negative 2 squared, plus y minus negative 1 squared, equals 72 divided by 2, which is 36. Or instead of 36, we can just make it 6 squared. Okay, just a little quick side note. 72 divided by 2 is 36, which is just 6 squared. This way you won't go home and go, how did he get that? Been there, done that. All right, so we know our h is equal to negative 2. Our k is equal to negative 1. We kind of separate that a little bit. And our r is equal to 6. Okay, so our center is hk, which is negative 2, negative 1. And our radius is 6. All right, so any questions on that one? Yep, so it's a little bit trickier when you have a coefficient in front of your x squared and y squared. All right. Okay, so that's going to shut off in a second anyway.